Unacceptable! His voice roared through the boardroom. $2 million in losses this quarter! 23 executives in $3,000 suits each sat frozen in their leather chairs. The air became thick, suffocating. No one dared to speak. A pen rolled to the edge and fell to the floor, making a sharp sound that broke the silence like gunfire. Victor Rivers, 39 years old, rose slowly from his seat. His black Armani suit seemed to absorb all the light in the room. His gray eyes gleamed like freshly sharpened steel. His white knuckles against the glass betrayed the contained fury boiling beneath his perfect appearance. But not even Victor Rivers could imagine who was about to put him in his place. Everyone knew that one wrong word could cost them their job. Mark Harrison, financial director of 10 years at the company, lowered his head until it almost touched his sweaty papers. The other executives held their breath. Meanwhile, 2 floors up, someone in the building didn't tremble at the sound of his voice. Someone who pushed her cleaning cart through the hallways of the 44th floor, oblivious to the terror spreading like plague through the glass offices. What none of them knew was that in less than 10 minutes, their worlds would collide forever. If this story has already touched your heart in this first minute, subscribe to the channel. Here you'll find stories that heal, inspire, and make you believe in human goodness. 9 minutes exactly after that roar, while Victor humiliated Mark Harrison in front of everyone, the door opened with a soft creak. A small woman in a worn blue uniform with hair pulled back in a ponytail entered, pushing a cleaning cart from the 44th floor. Her worn shoes made no sound on the marble. "You're fired, Harrison. Pack your things and get out of my company," Mark broke down. His eyes filled with tears. "Please, Mr. Rivers, I have a family. My daughter is sick." "Not my problem." Grace Martinez, 32 years old, stopped her cloth mid-motion. She had seen many things in her life. She had endured humiliation, loss, pain. But she had never seen a man destroy another human being for pure pleasure. Her brown eyes fixed on Victor Rivers. Something burned in her chest. "Yes, it is." The words left her mouth like a whisper that became thunder. 23 heads turned toward her. The air froze. Victor Rivers, the man who made all of America tremble, was completely speechless. The worlds had just collided. 2 hours before the storm, at 6 in the morning, Grace Martinez waited for the subway at the Queens station. The October cold bit her rosy cheeks. In her cloth bag, she carried a deli sandwich and an apple. Her uniform smelled of cheap detergent, but it was spotless. At 32, she had cleaned offices, hospitals, schools. She had mopped floors where $500 shoes walked. She had emptied trash cans full of discarded $1-million contracts. She never complained. She never asked for more. Widowed since 28. Her husband had died in a construction accident, crushed by a beam while building towers for men like Victor Rivers. 4 years later, Grace had learned that pain was better carried when transformed into purpose. The subway took her to Manhattan's financial district. Glass towers that scratched the clouds. Men and women in suits running with briefcases and phones glued to their ears. A world that revolved around money. Rivers Corporation occupied 3 complete towers. 45 floors of power, influence, and corporate terror. "First time, huh?" The security guard looked her up and down. "A warning. Here you don't talk to the boss. Don't look at him. Don't even breathe near him." "Why?" "Because he's Victor Rivers, the man who ruins lives for fun." On the 44th floor, Carmen, the cleaning supervisor, handed her the supplies. "Girl, this isn't like other places. Mr. Rivers sees everything, hears everything, and if something doesn't please him—" Carmen drew her finger across her throat. "In 5 years, I've seen 100 employees fall. Good employees, with families, with mortgages. But Grace had known truly evil men. Bosses who abused, doctors who lied about diagnoses to charge more, lawyers who stole inheritances. Victor Rivers sounded more like a wounded man than an evil man. At 8 sharp, Footsteps echoed through the hallway like war drums. Conversations cut short. Coffee grew cold in trembling hands. Victor Rivers appeared like a storm dressed in Armani. He walked as if he owned the world. And maybe he did. Grace watched him while cleaning the plants on the 44th floor. She didn't look away when he passed heading to the elevator. She didn't lower her head when his gray eyes found hers for a second. Victor Rivers stopped. For the first time in years, someone had looked him directly in the eyes without fear. But who was this woman who looked at him as if he were a normal man? What story did she carry in those brown eyes that shone with a light he had forgotten existed? 10 minutes later, that question would get an answer that would change his life forever. During the following days, Victor Rivers developed a strange obsession. Without realizing it, he searched for the eyes of the new janitor. Grace Martinez, according to her personnel file, widowed, no children, address in one of Manhattan's humblest neighborhoods. But there was something more in that file he couldn't read. A strength that hid behind her kind smile, a story of pain that had forged steel instead of breaking it. Thursday morning, Victor arrived angrier than usual. The presentation for the Japanese investors had been a disaster. Someone had to pay. Patricia Rodriguez, marketing director, trembled in her glass office. She had worked 6 years to get there. She had 2 small children and a sick mother who depended on her salary. "Incompetent!" Victor's voice pierced through the walls. "The numbers were wrong. The charts were garbage. Mr. Rivers, I can explain. I don't want explanations. I want results." Grace cleaned the hallway windows. She could see everything. Patricia cried silently while Victor humiliated her in front of 3 other colleagues. "You're finished in this sector. No one will hire you after this." Patricia collapsed in her chair. Her world was crumbling. Grace left her cleaning spray and entered the office. "Excuse me?" Victor turned like a lion interrupted in his hunt. "What do you want?" "Patricia worked until 2 in the morning yesterday." Her voice was soft but firm. "I saw the lights on from the street." The silence became dense. Patricia's 3 colleagues exchanged panicked glances. "I'm sorry?" Victor's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "The errors in the numbers weren't hers. They were from the analysis department. Patricia corrected them 3 times, but they arrived late." "And how do you know that?" Grace pointed to the trash can. "Because when I cleaned last night, I saw the discarded versions, all with handwritten corrections, in Patricia's handwriting." Victor Rivers was speechless. In 15 years running the company, no one had dared to contradict him with facts. "Miss Martinez," his voice became dangerously low, "you're here to clean, not to give opinions about my executive's work." Grace looked him directly in the eyes. "You're right. I'm here to clean, but injustice also makes a mess, Mr. Rivers." The air could be cut with a knife. Patricia had stopped crying and looked at Grace as if she were an angel or a madwoman. Victor Rivers had built his empire on fear and respect. No one, absolutely no one, spoke to him like that. "Get out of my office." "Yes, sir." Grace gathered her supplies and headed for the door. But before leaving, she turned once more. "Patricia is a good person and a good worker. You know that." And she left, leaving Victor Rivers with something he hadn't felt in years: confusion. That night, while reviewing reports in his empty office, Victor opened Patricia's trash can. Indeed, there were the corrected versions. Page after page of numbers reviewed by hand until the early morning hours. The janitor was right, but how had she seen something that he, with all his power and control, had overlooked? And why did it bother him so much that she was right? Friday night, Grace worked alone on the 42nd floor. It was her routine, cleaning the main offices when everyone had left. This way, she avoided nervous glances and whispers. Victor Rivers' office was a temple of power. Italian mahogany desk, leather chair, bookshelf full of awards and recognitions. But there was something more. On the desk, half hidden among important papers, a small, worn photograph. An older woman with a tired smile and weathered hands, embracing a boy with gray eyes. Grace picked it up accidentally while cleaning. The frame was broken at one corner, as if it had been grabbed many times. "What are you doing here?" The voice startled her. Victor Rivers stood in the doorway, his suit wrinkled and an expression she hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. "Sorry, Mr. Rivers. I was just cleaning." "I asked what you're doing here at 10 at night." Grace placed the photograph exactly where it was. "It's when I work best, without bothering anyone." Victor entered his office and closed the door. His movements were different, slower, more human. "Did you see the photograph?" "It wasn't my intention." "But you saw it." Grace nodded. "That was my mother." Victor approached the desk and took the photo. "She died when I was 15. Cancer. I'm sorry. She was a janitor, like you." The words fell like stones in a deep well. Grace felt something move in her chest, a connection she didn't expect. "She cleaned offices at night to support me. She worked 3 different jobs." Victor ran his finger over the broken glass. "I promised myself I would never be poor again, that I would never depend on others' kindness again." "And did you keep your promise?" "Yes." His voice sounded empty. "But in the process, I forgot everything she taught me." Grace took a step closer. "What did she teach you?" "That money doesn't make people. People make money." Victor looked up and met Grace's eyes. "That dignity can't be bought. That kindness can't be sold. Why are you telling me this?" Victor remained silent for a long minute. Outside, Manhattan sparkled with millions of lights. Inside, 2 opposite worlds met on neutral ground. "Because you remind me of her." "How?" "Because you talk to me like I'm human, not like I'm a monster." Grace felt something breaking inside America's most powerful man. Something that had been broken for a long time. "Monsters are made, Mr. Rivers, not born." "And can they be unmade?" For the first time in days, Grace smiled. "My husband used to tell me something before he died. Grace, people don't change overnight, but they can change night after night." Victor Rivers remained silent. He had built walls so high he had forgotten what the sky looked like without bars. "How did your husband die?" "Work accident. Construction." Grace didn't look away. "He was 30. He was good. Like your mother, I suppose." "Did you blame them?" "Who?" "The company. The system. The rich who build towers while the poor fall from them." "For a while." Grace gathered her cleaning supplies. "But resentment weighs more than sadness, and I had already carried enough weight." Victor Rivers watched her leave his office. For the first time in years, he stayed awake all night, not reviewing contracts or planning strategies, thinking about his mother, thinking about a boy who had promised never to be vulnerable again, thinking that maybe he had kept that promise too well. The changes began like raindrops before a storm, imperceptible at first, but constant. Monday, Victor Rivers arrived at the office and didn't shout. He simply asked for the reports in a normal voice. Employees looked at each other confused. Tuesday, Patricia Rodriguez received a written apology, brief, formal but sincere. Also a salary increase no one expected. Wednesday, Victor crossed paths with Grace in the hallway. For the first time, he didn't ignore her. "Good morning, Mrs. Martinez." "Good morning, Mr. Rivers." That was all. But the employees who witnessed it talked about it for weeks. Grace noticed the small changes. The way Victor spoke on the phone no longer included shouting. The way he read reports with more patience. Employees began walking with less fear. Thursday afternoon, Victor found her cleaning the conference room. "Mrs. Martinez, may I ask you something?" Grace stopped cleaning and turned toward him. "Of course." "How do you manage not to hate?" The question was so direct, so raw, that Grace took a moment to process it. "Hate whom?" "People like me. Rich people who take advantage of workers like you." Grace sat in one of the conference table chairs. Victor, after a moment of hesitation, sat across from her. For the first time, they were at the same level. "May I tell you a story?" Victor nodded. "When my husband died, the construction company didn't want to pay compensation. They said it was his fault, that he hadn't followed safety measures. Grace's eyes moistened, but her voice remained firm. For 2 years, I fought in courts. I lost the house. I lost our savings. I lost faith. What happened? One day I was cleaning at a hospital, pediatric ward. I saw an 8-year-old girl who had cancer. Her parents slept in plastic chairs every night. They had no money for a hotel. Victor leaned forward. I gave them what little I had, $50. It was nothing for them, but it was everything for me. Grace smiled with moist eyes. That girl looked at me and said, "Thank you, lady. You're an angel." Did she recover? I don't know, but I did. Victor didn't understand. I realized that hate had turned me into something I wasn't. My husband had loved me for my kindness, and I was killing it with resentment. And what do you feel now? That every day I have the opportunity to be better than yesterday. That every person I meet gives me the opportunity to choose, be part of the problem or part of the solution. Victor Rivers remained silent for a long time. Do you think I can change? I think you're already changing. That night, Victor canceled 3 important meetings. For the first time in 15 years, he left the office before 8. He walked through Manhattan's streets, watching people who cleaned sidewalks, who closed shops, who went home on the subway. His mother had been one of them, and he had forgotten her in his race to the top. The next day, he called a general meeting. Starting today, salaries for cleaning and maintenance staff increase 30%. They'll also have private health insurance and 2 extra weeks of vacation. The silence in the room was deafening. Any questions? Carmen, the cleaning supervisor, raised her hand timidly. May I ask why, Mr. Rivers? Victor looked at her directly. Because you build this company as much as we do. It's time we pay you what you deserve. Employees looked at each other. Was this the same man who a week before had fired someone for spilling coffee on his desk? Grace, who was cleaning in the corner, smiled silently. Monsters could be unmade, night after night. 3 weeks after the change, the storm came from where it was least expected. Rivers Corporation's main shareholders called an emergency meeting. Edward Santamaria, the majority shareholder after Victor, had been watching the changes with growing concern. The salary increases, new benefits, the CEO's strange benevolence didn't fit with the maximum profit philosophy. Victor, we need to talk, he said on a Tuesday morning, bursting into his office with 4 other board members. Grace was cleaning the plants near the window. Victor didn't ask her to leave. He had learned to value her silent presence. The numbers don't lie, Edward spread a report on the desk. Operating costs have risen 15% in 3 weeks. Investors are nervous. Employees are more productive than ever, Victor responded calmly. Employees aren't pets. They're resources. Edward hit the table. And you're spoiling them. I'm treating them like human beings. Since when do you care about human beings? The question floated in the air like an accusation. Grace felt the tension growing in the room. Victor rose slowly from his chair. Since I remembered who I was before I became who you wanted me to be. And who were you? Another shareholder asked sarcastically. A janitor's son. The silence was absolute. Edward smiled cruelly. There's the problem. You're getting sentimental, and feelings don't pay dividends. Feelings build companies that last generations, Victor responded. Edward approached the desk and took Victor's mother's photograph. Is this her? The woman who's making you weak from the grave? Victor stiffened. His eyes darkened dangerously. Put that photograph back where it was. Or what? You'll fire me? Edward laughed bitterly. You've forgotten who really runs things here. Grace saw something in Victor's eyes she hadn't seen before. A cold, controlled, but lethal fury. The old Victor was emerging. Edward? His voice dropped to a threatening whisper. You know what? You're right. Edward dropped the photo roughly. You need a reminder of how this world works. He pointed at Grace. Her, the janitor. She's fired, right now. Grace stopped cleaning. Her heart stopped. Victor stood up so fast his chair rolled backward. No. Excuse me? I said no. Edward smiled like a shark. It's not your decision, Victor. It's a board vote. All in favor of firing. What's her name? Grace Martinez, she murmured. All in favor of firing Grace Martinez. Raise your hand. 4 hands went up. Only Victor's was missing. Simple majority. She's fired. Grace began gathering her supplies with dignity. She wouldn't give them the pleasure of seeing her cry. But inside, something was breaking. She wasn't just losing her job. She was losing the chance to see Victor completely become the man his mother had raised. Wait, Victor said. Everyone turned toward him. If she goes, I go. What? Edward couldn't believe what he was hearing. I resign. Right now. You're crazy. You have million-dollar contracts, commitments with investors. Victor walked to his desk and opened a drawer. He pulled out a letter already written, dated that same morning. It's already decided. This is my resignation letter. Edward paled. The other shareholders looked at each other in panic. Contracts can be broken. Commitments can be renegotiated. Victor walked toward Grace. But dignity. Once you recover it, you don't lose it again. Edward was red with rage. All this for a simple cleaning employee. Victor turned toward him with steel eyes. This simple employee taught me more about leadership in 3 weeks than you did in 15 years. Victor extended his hand toward Grace. Want to build something new with me? Grace looked into his eyes. She saw the boy in the photograph. She saw the man who had buried his goodness under mountains of fear and ambition. She saw the man who had decided to unearth it. What do you have in mind? A company where people matter as much as numbers, where no one is afraid to speak, where no one feels invisible. And how are we going to finance it? Victor smiled for the first time in the entire meeting. Remember what you told me about my mother? That she had raised a good man. Grace nodded. She also taught me to save. I have enough personal money to start something new. Something of ours. Grace took his hand. I accept. Edward shouted legal threats while Victor and Grace left the office. Employees from the 42nd floor looked out to see what was happening. Victor stopped in the middle of the hallway and raised his voice. Anyone who wants to follow me on a new adventure, I'll see you tomorrow at the cafe downstairs at 9 in the morning. Patricia Rodriguez was the first to approach. Are you sure about this, Mr. Rivers? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Carmen, the cleaning supervisor, joined them. Will there be room for people like us? Grace answered before Victor. Carmen, people like us are going to run the departments. And they left, with the janitor who had swept the dust from his soul walking beside him, followed by a growing procession of employees who had decided to bet on humanity. The next day, 43 employees were waiting at the cafe. Patricia Rodriguez was the first to raise her hand. When do we start? Humanity First now occupied 5 towers in Manhattan's financial district. But these towers were different. They had green spaces on every floor, daycare for employees' children, and a policy no one else had implemented. Every executive had to work 1 week a year in cleaning or maintenance. Victor Rivers walked through the hallways with a calm pace. He no longer wore Armani suits. His shirts were simple cotton, his shoes comfortable. His hair, now with silver streaks, was styled naturally. But the most noticeable change was in his eyes. They were no longer cold steel. They were steel tempered by the fire of experience and cooled by wisdom. On the company walls hung photographs of all the founding employees, 43 smiling faces who had bet on a dream when no one else believed in it. Patricia Rodriguez now directed the innovation department. Carmen had founded the first corporate school for employees' children. Mark Harrison, who had returned 2 years later, directed a foundation that helped families in crisis. In his office, which now had transparent glass walls so everyone could see inside, hung a simple painting, his mother's photograph, now in a golden frame next to another more recent photograph. Grace Martinez, now Director of Human Welfare and co-founder, smiled in that second photo. Her blue uniform had been replaced by a simple but elegant suit, but her eyes remained the same, warm, wise, infinitely kind. Employees no longer walked in fear. The hallways echoed with laughter, spontaneous conversations, the sound of a company that breathed humanity. In the main lobby, a golden plaque read, "Founded in 2024 by Victor Rivers and Grace Martinez, built by 43 dreamers who believed companies could have souls." That afternoon, Victor had an important appointment. A conference at Columbia University. The title of his talk, Human Leadership in the Digital Age. He adjusted his tie and left his office. Grace was waiting for him in the hallway. "Nervous?" she asked. "Always. Do you think they'll like it?" "They're going to love you. Like always." During the car ride, Victor watched Manhattan's streets. On a corner, he saw a woman cleaning a store window. She reminded him of his mother. She reminded him of Grace in those early days. "Do you know how many companies have copied our model?" Grace asked. "How many?" 237 in America, 1,400 worldwide. Victor smiled. "My mother would be proud to know her son helped change the way the world sees work." In the auditorium, 500 business administration students waited for America's most respected CEO, the man who had revolutionized the concept of corporate leadership. Victor stepped up to the podium. The lights dimmed. The silence became expectant. 10 years ago, he began, I was the country's most feared CEO. I had power, money, respect based on fear. I had everything." Dramatic pause. "I was also the loneliest man in the world." Students leaned forward. "One day a woman entered my office. She wasn't an investor, consultant, or therapist. She was a janitor, and she taught me the most important lesson of my life." Victor searched for Grace's eyes in the audience. She smiled from the front row. "She taught me that real power doesn't come from making others fear you. It comes from making others believe in themselves. That true leadership isn't directing from above, but walking alongside others toward a common goal." The applause began soft and grew into a standing ovation. "That woman didn't just change my company. She changed my life, and today I want to share with you what I learned from her." The conference lasted 2 hours. Victor spoke about happiness metrics, the profitability of empathy, how a company can be a place where people grow instead of just work. At the end, a student raised her hand. "Mr. Rivers, where is that woman who inspired you now?" Victor smiled and pointed to the front row. "There, where she's always been, by my side, reminding me every day who I really am." Grace stood and waved. The applause became a standing ovation. After the conference, several students approached. A young woman named Anna said, "Mr. Rivers, my father runs a company like yours used to be. Do you think he can change?" Victor looked at Grace, who nodded with a smile. "Everyone can change, Anna. They just need to find their grace, or better yet, become someone else's grace." That night, while walking through the university campus under the stars, Victor stopped by an old fountain. "You know what?" he said to Grace. "What?" "My mother would be proud." "Of the company?" "Of you." "Of what we built together. But above all, of the man I became." Grace sat on the fountain's edge. Water sang softly behind her. "You know what your mother told me the first time I saw her in that photograph?" Victor sat beside her, confused. "What did she tell you?" "I don't know. But when I looked at that photo, I knew she had raised a good man. He just needed to find his way back home." Victor took Grace's hand. Not as boss and employee, not as CEO and director. As two human beings who had found each other at the exact moment they needed each other most. "Thank you," he murmured. "For what?" "For not giving up on me." Grace squeezed his hand. Good men are never lost forever. They just hide until someone finds them. They sat in silence, listening to the fountain's water and the distant murmur of the city they had changed, one human decision at a time. In the Humanity First offices, lights remained on in the night employees' floor. Janitors, security guards, maintenance staff worked with dignity and respect. Their uniforms had the company motto embroidered, "Every person matters." Among them, a young woman named Sophia cleaned the windows on the 44th floor. She was new, nervous, trying to do her job well. She didn't know that in that same company, 10 years earlier, another woman had started just like her and had ended up changing a lost man's world. But good stories have a strange way of repeating themselves. And Sophia, without knowing it, had already been noticed by the new operations director, a young and ambitious man who was starting to lose his humanity in the race for success. The next day, newspapers would headline, "Victor Rivers, the CEO who chose humanity over millions." But Victor wasn't reading newspapers that morning. He was in his office, writing in a simple notebook, his memoirs, a book he would donate to public libraries so anyone could read it. On the first page, he had written a dedication. "To my mother, who taught me to dream. To Grace, who taught me to wake up. And to all who clean the hallways where others' dreams walk. You are the world's true architects." On the last page, there was a single sentence. The sentence he would say at every conference, in every interview, every time someone asked how his life had changed. It wasn't an assistant, not a consultant, not an investor. It was the woman who swept the hallways, who also swept the dust from my soul. And every time he said it, Grace Martinez smiled from wherever she was. Because she knew the best stories don't have endings. They only have beginnings that repeat every day, when we choose to be better than yesterday. When we choose to see the human being behind the uniform. When we choose kindness to be stronger than fear. And when we remember that everyone, absolutely everyone, deserves a second chance to be who they really are. If this story touched your heart, leave us a comment with your opinion and tell us what country you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that heal the soul.